Special delivery. The mail's here. On this episode of the Nerd Byword, Dave and I will be answering your submitted questions. Plus, as always, we keep you abreast of all important news in Nerd Realm and 2 detective-centric nerd commendations. The Byword begins now. Greetings and salutations once more. Welcome to another episode of the Nerd Byword podcast, the only show that subjects a traditional Superman fan to troll-infested Twitter spaces and watches the Snyder Bros slowly but surely chip away all vestiges of hope and optimism. I'm Kris, he's Dave, the aforementioned Superman fan, and we are here to submit an offering upon the altar of the nerd gods. In today's episode, we'll be answering the questions that you, our listeners, have submitted to our social media pages. Now, if you're concerned that you may have missed your chance, rest assured that we are continually fielding questions for future episodes. Simply reach out to us on Twitter and or Instagram at NerdByword or use the hashtag AskTheByword or send us a DM and we'll be more than happy to save your submissions for the future. But first and foremost, Dave has a news story that is hot off the press and has me casting off all insecurities and jumping for joy. Dave, what is going on?
Yeah, arguably the best Spider-Man movie ever, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, yes, you heard me right, it's the best, is set to get a sequel. Although information about the next installment, likely once again focused on Miles Morales and his contact with Spider-Man characters from across the multiverse, has been hard to come by, some casting news has finally spilled out. Issa Rae, the star of HBO's acclaimed comedy drama Insecure, has joined the voice cast as Jessica Drew Spider-Woman. Now, I hope all the nerds listening are at least somewhat familiar with the character, but if you are not, Jessica Drew debuted in the comic books in 1977 as Marvel's first Spider-Woman. Her origin has been revamped and tweaked several times, but in essence, she got her superpowers due to her parents' experiments. Her spider powers actually vary greatly from Peter Parker's, and she even served on the side of the villains for a while working with Hydra. Eventually, she'd end up on the Avengers roster for a while. Now, Drew's a great character, and what we have here with Rae is a really inspired casting. And I'm excited to see this character come to life on the big screen. Spider-Verse was a fantastic movie. I'd argue it's probably the best thing that Sony has done when it comes to comic book movies. And this news just further cements my excitement for the sequel. Kris, what do you think about this casting?
Oh man, if you saying that Into the Spider-Verse is a hot take, then it is the hot chicken soup with meat substitute for my vegetarian soul. It is by far and away the best Spider-Man movie. All love to Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield. Yeah, there's my hot take. Anyways, yeah, Into the Spider-Verse is just the best. It is one of those movies that I can just put on and feel good about things. I thought that in a lot of ways it served even as a better origin story for Miles Morales than a lot of his comic book stories have done. And Issa Rae is someone, as a creative, as an individual that I have followed through the years and absolutely enjoyed everything that they've done. So I'm so excited to see her here. And like, even as soon as this news broke last night, like the fan art imagining her as even like the live action version, it has just been, just a joy to behold. And I think it's a really inspired casting, to borrow your phrase. And I'm super excited about this. Jessica Drew is one of, if you have not done a deep dive on like the creation and, inspirations behind the character of Jessica Drew, just at the onset, I heavily recommend. It's a wild and messy thing, but they worked its way. It worked itself out into a really complex and an intriguing character, who ultimately was even an Avenger. So I'm really excited to see this going forward. I absolutely adore the first film, and I need more.
Yeah, and I do too. The animation style in particular really kind of blew me away when it comes to this movie. They managed to do some really unique stuff with the animation, pretty experimental in a lot of ways, and I'm really excited to see how they build on those visuals. There's just a lot to be excited about. The writing was a lot of fun. The humor was spot on. The characters had a lot of heart. And then ultimately, the animation too. So yeah, this is great news. This movie just cannot get here soon enough, Chris.
Yeah, and I think back to Oscar-winning director of Parasite, Bong Joon-ho, who said, people who thumb their nose at foreign films, it's like once you get past that 1-inch obstacle of subtitles, you open yourself up. I'm paraphrasing heavily, but like you open yourself up to this big, wonderful world. And I think that, and in a lot of ways, animation is the same. A lot of people thumb their nose or poo-poo animation, and they don't enjoy the bliss that is, things like Clone Wars or Star Wars Rebels, because, ooh, that's animation and I'm better than that. So I think, Into the Spider-Verse is far and away the best Spider-Man film. And if you are, standing on the sidelines because it's animation, you're really missing out.
Yeah, if you have a sense that somehow animation is beneath you, then clearly you can't be much of a comic book fan, since here too we're talking about you know art, rather than having live action people portraying these characters. So I mean, if you love comic books, why not love animation as well? Now, Chris, you're bringing us to the world of Marvel Comics, where we got some creative team shakeups coming. What have you got for us this week?
So Al Ewing and Donny Cates are performing a Freaky Friday swap, at least in terms of the Marvel characters that they're going to be writing about. Cates, alongside friend and artist Ryan Stegman, will pen his final issue in their illustrious Venom run, with issue number 200 later this month. The pair have completely revitalized the character with a degree of care and attention to detail that stands alone, truly. In turn, spawning two universe-wide crossovers, Absolute Carnage and most recently King in Black. This November, however, Cates and superstar artist Ryan Ottley of Invincible and Amazing Spider-Man fame are going to relaunch the Hulk title following the conclusion of Ewing's Eisner Award-winning Immortal Hulk with September's issue 50. The cover for the first issue, along with some interior panels, were revealed in accompaniment with this press release, and I have to say that they're absolutely breathtaking. On the flip side of this deal, Ewing and superstar writer Ram V will be co-writing the new Venom title, also releasing in November, and the press release leans heavily into both writers' background and expertise in the horror genre. Ewing and V will be joined by artist Brian Hitch, and the solicited art is teasing a return to the cosmic aspects of the character. The idea that we could be getting a horror space comic is incredibly intriguing. Dave, the first ever nerdy was awarded to the Immortal Hulk, so you're something of an authority figure on this. What's your take?
Yeah, I've heard excellent things about the current Venom run, obviously. And as you've mentioned, I've spoken time and again about how awesome the Immortal Hulk has been. Now, admittedly, and I know this might be heresy, but Venom is not exactly my favorite character. So I generally don't follow him too much outside of, crossovers with Spider-Man. The creative team shakeup on both of these series is obviously due. Both creative teams have accomplished a lot, and at some point, unless you want things to get a little stale, you have to shake things up a little bit. And the creative teams for both books to swap, it's very smart. And you have two excellent creative teams here. And still, I think the Immortal Hulk is pretty damn defining. It's a defining run on the Hulk character, and following a defining run like that, no matter how good the creative team is always going to be difficult. I'm going to continue following the Hulk after this shakeup, and I will probably continue to not follow Venom because it's just not really my character. But I want to see how things shake out, particularly for the Hulk. But I'm going to be honest, man, the new Hulk team has their work cut out for them. Immortal Hulk was, once one of those once in a lifetime runs, extremely special, character defining, with a completely fresh take on the character, which is so very rare in comic books today, that somebody can come along and have a completely new take on a character that's been around for, 60 years or something like that. So yeah, I think they have their work cut out for them. I'm going to be watching, but here's hoping it works out.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll completely echo your sentiments. So maybe we're going against the grain here, but Venom is just not a character that catered to my interests, and that's completely okay. To each their own. I think the Venom storylines that I enjoyed the most are the ones that he's directly involved with Spider-Man. So they really play on that, inversion, of all the things that Peter Parker Spider-Man is. You have that yin to the yang, so to speak. So, and so it was really, and it's really a testament to the craft of Stegman and Cates that I picked up Absolute Carnage, and was really intrigued by it. A character that really didn't do anything for me in a lot of previous iterations. I'm currently in the midst of an Al Ewing read through. All of his Marvel stuff has come highly recommended to me, so I'm still in 2014 as far as that read through goes. But I'm excited to see where this goes, and I think it's really interesting that we basically have this kind of switcherooski with the writers. But I've also heard great things about Rom V. I don't want that to be lost in this press release either. The Many Deaths of Layla Starr has come highly recommended to me. It's at the very top of my to read pile, and I highly anticipate that it's going to be a nerd commendation coming very soon based on what I've heard, and another great Boom Studios book. So I'm interested to see what he can do at Marvel as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to come across as negative because these are excellent creators who are probably going to craft some excellent stories. I mean, that's what they do. But again, like just Immortal Hulk is just something that was deeply special to me, and it's not quite done yet. So I'm still enjoying the ride a great deal. And following something like that it's going to be difficult no matter who the creators are, I think.
Absolutely. That is an unenviable task, no doubt about it. All right, that wraps up our Nerd News segment. When we return from our first break, we're going to be hitting you with a mailbag. Not across the face, not literally hitting you with a mailbag, but we will... Here, let's try that again. We're going to be opening the mailbag to answer your questions. That sounds much more docile and enjoyable. Stick around.
Listen, DC movies are the worst. They can't do it. They copy Marvel, but they don't do it well.
Stop it.
They're the worst. Think about it. Suicide Squad.
No.
Fail. Green Lantern. Flop.
Okay.
How did they make Ryan Reynolds bad?
I agree.
How do you do it?
I agree that the live action sucks, but man, the animated stuff is where it's at. They did it right there. You need to check that out.
All right. You have a point. Well, to hear more stuff like that, listen to us on VCM Reviews. We review video games, comics, movies. We debate, we chat, we discuss. We love our nerdy hobbies. I'm Zach, your host.
And I'm Caleb, your host.
Please come check us out. VCM Reviews.
Welcome back for today's Byword Big Talk. We are diving deep into the mailbag to answer your questions as submitted to our social media pages. And again, if you missed out on this episode, be sure to follow us, tweet at us, shake an angry nerd fist, if you will, at Nerd Byword on Twitter and Instagram. First question comes from Twitter. Our pal, the tech lord, at Lex Pendragon. He asks, I read My Little Pony to my daughters and was impressed by how they were made. Netflix's She-Ra wasn't my She-Ra, quote, at all, but they did it well. Hey, Nerd Byword, what is the best not made for you thing you've actually enjoyed? Dave.
Is there anything truly not made for somebody? I mean, I know that I have always had a tendency to leapfrog across genres, gravitating towards, interesting characters and premises, no matter where I find them. I see where Lex is coming from, of course. It's all about, target audience. Who were the creators targeting when they made this thing? And yeah, there have been plenty of times I was not the target audience and still loved the nerdy product. I think the most defining for me was probably Sailor Moon. I came across the anime as a kid, and strangely enough, Dragon Ball didn't really interest me at all, but Sailor Moon, that had just the right ingredients to pull me in. You know, superhero battles, reincarnation, an epic love story, a great sense of humor, the camaraderie between the characters, you know, the sheer epic nature of the storytelling. It all had me hooked very quickly. Now, obviously, the target audience for Sailor Moon was primarily, you know, girls, but that never stopped me before. I still have a soft spot for Sailor Moon. I own all the manga volumes, and I've even watched the recent remake, Sailor Moon Crystal. And I still love the property. I think it's very well executed. It's a good story. It's, you know, features interesting characters. And I think that kind of thing transcends the notion of target audience. And I followed this up by also saying that, you know, She-Ra and the Princesses of Power on Netflix was fantastic. You know, similar reasons to Sailor Moon, actually. Epic storytelling, strong camaraderie between the characters, battles with friggin' swords, great sci-fi elements. I mean, it simply landed for me. So yeah, I really don't give a crap about who something is made for. If it connects with me, I'll read it, watch it, listen to it, and I'll do so proudly. So, Lex, you say My Little Pony comics are pretty good. I guess I need to check those out.
Yeah, so anime, for one reason or another, is just something that doesn't scratch that itch for me, by and large. So it's not really something that I've delved into. It's crazy because so many of my kids are head over heels into it. That it's really odd, and maybe something I need to revisit and give it another shot. But, you know, just growing up, it's just not something that caught to me, that really grabbed me, I should say. So maybe it's something I need to revisit.
So, Chris, did you have any thing that you really loved that was just not targeted at you?
Dave, we're going to go really off the rails here with the first question. I don't know if this is particularly nerdy, but it's technically pop culture. So I'm shooting from the hip here. Peppa Pig.
Oh.
Peppa
Tell
Pig.
me more, tell me more.
I'm telling you. So you know, as a parent of young children, as I have been for quite some time, so I definitely see where Lex is coming from with this. Particularly with a lot of girls. I'm a girl dad. So I was subjected to a lot of, you know, children's programming, and have been over the years. And Peppa Pig was just a revelation. It was one of those things where I would just hand off a tablet and then, you know, it'd be playing on the TV as, you know, I'm cooking or cleaning house or whatever. And, you know, most of the time it's just mindless drivel, but Peppa Pig came on the screen. Peppa Pig came on the screen and I was like, what is this? You know, and I'm not a huge Anglophile as many people are, but, you know, there is something about a British accent and British jargon that is just innately for me. I think it just draws in an audience for so many people. And the voice acting on that series is just impeccable. I'm also, full disclosure, my favorite literary device is alliteration. So just naming characters, Peppa Pig, Danny Dog, Pedro Pony, even Pedro. Pedro is not the correct pronunciation of you know, a Spanish-based name at all. But there's something just captivating by this little world of anthropomorphic animals, and Peppa herself is obviously the most endearing, the most captivating, and just the level of sass on this tiny little piglet is just inspirational. I'm gonna go super deep and intellectual on you. I was at a point when I encountered Peppa Pig in my life where, you know, my self-esteem was not at its highest, and seeing this little pig in her own world, you know, with this level of overflowing confidence and sass was just so awesome to see. And then it kind of evolved into like nothing short of a meme lord. So Peppa Pig, and just that never ending source of sass and confidence. And, you know, I'm a huge Peppa Pig fan.
I'm going to be completely honest. I did not expect to be talking about Peppa Pig today. I'm familiar with the property, but I've never actually, watched any of it myself. So now you've got me incredibly curious, and I think I need to check out Peppa Pig.
Well, just wait till that bouncing baby boy, starts talking, and then subject him to Peppa Pig, and you'll both be in for a world of entertainment. All right, our next question comes from our pals. We actually had a crossover with, so go back and check that one in the archives. You can find them on Instagram at nerd.nostalgia, the Nerd Nostalgia Podcast. They ask us, what do you think will happen in the next Marvel phase? The burning question, Dave. What do you think?
I mean, if you have a burning question, you probably should consult a doctor. That doesn't sound healthy. Now, what do I think will happen? Beats me. I mean, at this point, it's really anybody's guess. What do I want to happen? I mean, that's probably something I can probably, give a little bit more input on. But what will happen? Look, after watching WandaVision, I think everything is up in the air. I think we finally might be entering a phase of the MCU where they're willing to take some risks. I mean, in the storytelling, they've always been willing to take risks with, characters that are a little underappreciated or offbeat, like with Guardians of the Galaxy, for example. But actual risks in the storytelling and how they structure things, I think we're starting to see something new coming along there. So I'm not sure what's going to happen. But I have a list of things I'd like to happen. I'd love to see Spider-Man get a movie free of the baggage of Tony Stark. I really, really, really want to see a Avengers movie entitled New Avengers. I hope when they integrate the X-Men into the MCU, they don't try to veer too far off the classic interpretation just because they are desperate to make something that is different from the Fox X-Men movies. I want to see the Netflix heroes make the leap to the big screen, particularly Jessica Jones and Daredevil. Same actors, pretty please. And I want a Fantastic Four movie to lean strongly into bonkers sci-fi rather than watered-down superheroics. Make it something different. Mostly, though, I just want the MCU to continue to diversify. Like I said, they've made some great strides with stuff like WandaVision. Now, when I say diversify, I'm talking about, experimental storytelling. Not every movie should feel and look the same. Try new things. Really lean into some of the more crazy, obscure corners of Marvel. I think they have the coffers to absorb an occasional miss. If something doesn't land with the audience at this point. So let's start really playing around with Marvel properties and do something different. That's what I think, Chris. What do you think?
I really think that, what's the old adage? The more things change, the more they stay the same. And I don't want to be a wet blanket on this, but I think we are in the stage that we were in previous phases, where we kind of venture out, but then kind of come back in. It's kind of like the bellows of that you would use in a fireplace. You fan them out, and then you come back kind of in, so to speak. I think we are admittedly going completely in different uncharted directions in terms of storytelling and character work with things like WandaVision. Specifically WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier felt like a continuation of something like Captain America the Winter Soldier, very much in the same. I think while I enjoyed it, I felt like it was just a process of, okay, how can we tell the story of Sam Wilson becoming Captain America beyond just handing off the shield? So I felt like that was not as adventurous, if you will, as something like WandaVision or what it looks like Loki will be. At the same time, I think we're going to venture out, find this new cast of characters, and then kind of arrive back at arrive back at Go, collect our $200 with the team up film, like we're going to do with Multiverse of Madness. Wanda's coming back. You have. It's strongly hinted. I don't even know what the hell to believe with the Spider-Man movie. I've stopped putting any stock in any of these rumors. I'll believe it when I see it on the screen, not even necessarily a teaser, because we may get a Ralph Boner type situation. So I'm suspending all disbelief in anything Spider-Man related. But as far as, it looks like we're building towards a Young Avengers type of film property team up thing with, Eli Bradley, with Kate Bishop. So it kind of looks like we're going out kind of like one of those age-old movie tropes of where you go assemble the team, pun intended, and then come back towards the center. It's just going to be a different cast of characters. It's not going to be Chris Evans' Captain America. It's not going to be RDJ's Tony Stark, Iron Man. The one interesting thing that I'm looking forward to seeing, and I'm completely biased here, is what they do with the character of Thor, because Hemsworth is the only one that is kind of the old guard that is persisting, who has not moved on. He's just kind of evolving into this completely different type of character. So it's been really fascinating alongside Ruffalo's Hulk to kind of see that character evolve. And Love and Thunder is probably my most anticipated MCU entry, aside from, more Monica Rambeau content. More, please. So it's a long way to say I think it's going to be a different cast of characters, but a lot of the same kind of formulaic thing where you go find a new team and they, have this galactic threat. Maybe it's Galactus or whatever if you're introducing the FF. So yeah, I think it's going to be different ways of getting to the same destination, but it's going to be a lot of the same as well.
That's what I'm afraid of, more of the same. I really do hope that it's not just going to be fresh faces going through the same motions as, the previous faces. Here's hoping. I mean, I would like for Marvel to take a little bit more risks ultimately.
And don't get me wrong, I want that. It's just something intuition in me that is like, I've seen this all before, so I'm hoping that I'm wrong. But yeah. All right, next question comes from our buddy Castle Wolf Calder. You can find him on IG at Castle_Calder. He asks us, what current comic story running is your favorite? Now, we kind of did this with our nerdy for best ongoing. Dave, are you going to go with the same thing, or you going to want to feature another title?
I think what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and give you really briefly 4 things I'm actually actively reading right now and that I'm still enjoying. Far Sector is one. I've talked a lot about Far Sector over the last few months. I can't say enough about how good this thing is. It's probably the best DC comic series published in years. A great sci-fi story with a fantastic new Green Lantern character. It just works on absolutely every stinking level. I've talked about Something is Killing the Children before, too, at Boom Studios. It's my favorite horror comic going right now. A new arc actually just started with issue 16, which seems to be the origin story of the main character, Erica Slaughter. This is kicked off really well also. Fantastic again. Just as good as the first arc so far. Over at Marvel, as I have talked about a lot, I'm all about Immortal Hulk. It's probably my favorite book at Marvel. It's getting ready to come to an end. I've not really read a lot of Marvel regularly. Basically, Amazing Spider-Man and Immortal Hulk. So Hulk coming to an end kind of is depressing me. And I'm gonna go ahead and tell you the one that surprised me the most is probably Bendis's Justice League. I've been extremely down on Bendis's work at DC outside of probably his canceled Young Justice book, which I thought was actually decently fun. Despite a couple of missteps, it was decent fun. His Justice League has been surprisingly good. I'm not the biggest fan of the notion of putting Black Adam on the Justice League, but I think it's probably Bendis's best work at DC so far, and I find myself still reading it after a few issues, which is more than I can say for his Superman work. So those are probably the things I'm most actively reading right now, Chris.
Yeah, it's super interesting that you say that, because Bendis is one of those creators that I have huge love for. And I haven't read anything of his DC stuff, but even with his, later titles at Marvel before he jumped ship, it's kind of like, to use a sports reference, it's kind of like they lost their fastball. And it's someone that you immensely enjoyed their work. And it seems like they don't have that same kind of spark. And for me, that's Jason Aaron with what he is attempting to do on Avengers right now. We've made jokes about the whole Phoenix Force being Thor's mom. I've got Twitter friends that said Scott Summers banged Thor's mom. So it's really odd what they're doing there. After his Thor run, it was almost every single issue I just absolutely adored. And I'm not sure what he's trying to accomplish there on Avengers. We've also talked about it a lot. It's really hard. We talked about this with Hulk, to do something new with a character or the property that has been around for 60 plus years. So with, something like Avengers, you throw something at the wall and sometimes it doesn't stick. So it's really interesting to hear you say that your Bendis is writing something that you're enjoying. And that's very happy news for me.
Well, it's not peak Bendis, don't get me wrong. It's not Ultimate Spider-Man or anything. But he gets the voices of most of the characters quite right. The story is, intriguing enough right now. So, I've read Justice League runs that were really not enjoyable, and I just kind of stuck with it because I really just love those characters. But this time, I've read a lot worse. I'm actually enjoying this one. Now, Chris, what would you say is your current comic book story favorite?
Okay, so in addition to my nerdy award-winning ongoing series of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, just fantastic. I can't say enough about that title. I know that we could probably change the name of this podcast in some certain aspects to TMNT gushing fandom. But let's see. Other titles, obviously, of course, I'm such a simp for X-Men. I'm reading every X title that's out right now. My absolute favorite, far and away, is Hellions, which I've nerd commended in the past. What Zeb Wells is able to do. Sorry, I tried to combine his name into Zell's there. That was weird. It's an early morning. We're recording on an early morning today, guys. So please excuse. Zeb Wells is able to do on that title, taking this motley crew to completely lean into the cliche of characters that have been bad boys and just write them in a refreshingly hilarious and honest way has been really fun to see in this era of Krakoa, where you are completely absolved of all past crimes. What do you do with your life now? In a world where you are a mercenary and a mass murderer, what now? So what do you do with the previously worst of the worst in an era where you're trying to really turn the page and to start anew? Has been really fun to watch. And just completely leaning into the diva-ness of Mr. Sinister and watching him be nefarious behind the scenes in this puppet master, I should say, has been great. So Hellions is one of my favorite titles right now. In addition to that, okay, I'm going to try to limit myself to one X book. So there, that's the one. I'm going to limit myself. Let's see, other ongoings that I'm reading right now. I'm going to go against the grain, and Spider-Man Twitter is, very famous for being a very dangerous place to share an opinion, but I'm really enjoying what Nick Spencer is doing on Amazing Spider-Man. I'm completely caught up, so I don't want to spoil anything for you, Dave. I think you're a little behind, but like I just said, it's really hard to do something new with a character who not only has he had 60 plus years of stories published, but even more so than Hulk, most of that time he's had 2 to 3 titles being published. So he's probably at Marvel the character who's been most written about. And just the sheer attempt to do something new, something that is kind of in one hand revisiting that history and in the other hand, pushing forward with something new. And the one thing that I will wholeheartedly push back on is this whole notion of slow burn. And you're not giving me enough. You're making me wait. Isn't that the idea behind comic books? Is to sell more books? When you're a title like Amazing Spider-Man, and I'm getting a little soapboxy right now, but that's okay. When you're a title that is published bi-monthly, a lot of titles are just trying to get one book a month. You're a title that comes out twice a month, and that's not enough for you. That is just laughable to me. And I think a lot of Spider-Man fans are just spoiled. The Kindred storyline, famously or infamously, is the one that people are probably most dissatisfied with, as far as not enough detail. But I would push back and say it's not done. As a fan of soap operas and long-running series and long-term storytelling, and as an avid novel reader, I'm here for the long ride. So I don't need that instant gratification where it's a 3-issue arc. And, I think a lot of modern comics are criminally writing towards the trade. And I think Spencer is trying to do something different than that. And in some instances, it doesn't work. But in some instances, it does. And I'll fully admit, it's not all 100% gold, but I am enjoying what I'm reading. So Nick Spencer's Amazing Spider-Man, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Hellions, and let me see of another ongoing that I am enjoying. You know what? I'm breaking my own rule because I can. I'm thoroughly enjoying Marauders, another X title. Just the idea of what they are willing to do as far as it's pirates. It's pirates and mutants, and it's just a lot of like genre blending fun, taking underutilized characters like the Morlocks specifically in the last few issues and giving them a place on Madripoor specifically has been interesting. So I'm really interested with what Jerry Duggan and company have been doing there, and the art is fantastic. So those are my 4 titles, and that was really long-winded, and I apologize if that was too much.
Oh, that's not too much at all. And I will echo what you said about Amazing Spider-Man. Besides Immortal Hulk, it's probably the series I'm enjoying most right now at Marvel. And despite the fact that people have been very critical of the Kindred storyline and how long it's been sort of, stretched to, I don't think this was ever designed to be, one single arc in a larger story. I think the Kindred thing is the larger story. And I would not be surprised if the final wrap-up of the Kindred story will also coincide with Spencer's departure from the book. I think this is the overall arc that he is telling. And I think there's still a lot more to come before he's finished with it. So let that run slow burn in the background and enjoy the A storylines that he's telling. And that's sort of the overarching mythology. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the X-Files back in the 90s. Like everybody wanted every episode to be basically about the alien conspiracy. But that was sort of the overarching story of the entire series. Enjoy the standalone stuff with the monsters and stuff. That was the good stuff,
Yeah, and I think that's, and we've talked about this quite a bit on this show over the past year. Even with some of our guests touching on this, coincidentally, it's one of the slippery slopes of fandom is that sense of entitlement. And if I don't get exactly what I want, then I'm going to deride it, to the nth degree. And that's something that I want to avoid at all costs. So even if something doesn't, vibe with me and it's not something that I wholeheartedly enjoy, you know what? There's so much content out there. Just turn the channel or, switch apps or pick up another book.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So our pals at the Oblivion Bar, you can find them on Instagram and Twitter at the Oblivion Bar, who they were recently featured on Podcast Magazine's Top 50 Hot Podcasts. So congratulations to them. If you have not checked out, and we are not by any means a territorial thing, we are very much open and welcoming when it comes to nerd podcast. We love our brother and sister podcasts. So check out the Oblivion Bar. And they ask us, which DC hero do you think deserves their own HBO Max TV series? Dave, I am very much the junior in this endeavor, so I'm going to wholeheartedly toss this one up to you first.
Oh, here we go. I can think of a few. The thing about DC, of course, is that they have, much like Marvel, an incredibly deep roster of characters. And I would love to see some of the characters that don't get enough love to get, a little bit of fun on HBO Max. So let's see. First, about, say, Manhunter probably would be great. Not Martian Manhunter, but Manhunter, specifically the Kate Spencer version. I think that character is just an absolute favorite of mine. Her series is so underappreciated. It's very much of its time the little book that could. They constantly were trying about canceling it, and fans kind of just went into an uproar and kept it going for a significant portion of time. It's just a masterpiece that deserves more recognition. And I feel like the setup, the district attorney who's secretly the vigilante, I think would work extremely well as the setup for a great HBO Max series. And there's also, fairly good chunk of violence in the story that would lend itself towards the darker tone that HBO Max can take. I'd also love to see a question series as well. My dream setup would be that the Vic Sage version of the character, takes cop Renee Montoya under his wing a little bit and kind of starts training her as a future replacement because he's sick. He basically takes a good cop and then leads her down this rabbit hole of all these conspiracies and conspiracy theories and stuff. I loved Greg Rucka's take on Renee Montoya's evolution into the Question in the comics, and seeing something like that and her relationship with Vic Sage's version of the character on the screen would be totally my jam. Let's see, what else DC would be really good for HBO Max? Oh, Dial H for Hero would be fantastic. I think Dial H is one of those great underappreciated concepts anyways. And having, basically a more mature version of something like Ben 10 popping up on HBO Max would be a lot of fun as well. And, I'm just going to put this out there. I would love for somebody to make Gotham Central into a TV show. People always are like, well, Gotham was basically that show. It's supposed to be more about the cops. Gotham was not that show. I don't know what Gotham was. After the first season, I kind of just fell off the wagon because that was not what I was looking for.
I'll tell you what it was. It was a hot, sick mess. That's what it was.
Yeah, you know what? I tend to agree. But Gotham Central is such a deeply special show, taking this very much, ground level cop perspective approach on all this crazy crap that's happening in Gotham City, and in this really straight police procedural with all this fantastical stuff in the background. It probably stands as one of my all-time favorite DC comics, and seeing, a more faithful approach to that concept, I think would be amazing on HBO Max as well. So there's your, 4 that I think would be really, really good. Chris, do you have any thoughts?
Well, as a very casual DC consumer, and as far as comics goes, my exposure has been limited to my homework assignments for this show. So Blue Beetle, they're already going to do that. Stephanie Brown, I think they're doing a weird iteration of that on Batwoman.
Yeah.
So, but I'm going to go full simp, wave the ride here, and damn it, I want Journey Smollett in a Black Canary HBO Max series. Just write the check. Just write the check. Join the hashtag. Gail Simone is with us, and if Gail is with us, who can be against us? So, for God's sake, Journey already turned in an inspired performance in Birds of Prey. It's not exactly a break the bank kind of CGI budget that you would need. And she's also a nerdy award-winning actress, subtle plug, on another HBO Max series, Lovecraft Country. So, come on, make this happen. Shut up. You've already got my money. Just do something smart with it, HBO Max, and make a Black Canary series starring the goddess herself, Journey Smollett.
Yeah, you know what? I'll wholeheartedly echo that. Journey Smollett is absolutely fantastic in the role. I really enjoyed her take on Black Canary. I would love to see her reprise that role in any way, shape, or form. On the big screen, on the small screen, I don't care. I would just love to see more of that character, Chris.
All right, we head back to Instagram for another question from our pal Jay Tiggles. You can find him on Instagram at J_Tiggles. I believe maybe even the same at on Twitter. But he asks us, who would you give a PS4 Spider-Man Arkham Batman series kind of game to if you could make one? He says, I think an Ant-Man one would be pretty cool if they put enough time into it. Dave, do you have a hero that you want to feature in a solo video game?
You know, Ant-Man actually sounds really good. The whole shrinking down and, all the fun you could have with, this tiny dude in, these weird places where everything is ginormous. That sounds fun. But, there's really only one guy for me when it comes down to that, and that's Superman. How have we not gotten a good Superman game yet? People on social media constantly talk about how making a Superman game is impossible because players will immediately use his powers on, the civilian population because, people are jerks. And that's just dumb. When I think about how much fun it would be to play as Superman, rescuing people, fighting supervillains, following an excellent story, dude, that's what I need. I want developers to create a game that makes players feel like they are Superman, just like the Arkham games made you feel like you are Batman. So Superman, period. Where's our Superman game?
Yeah, I think that's just a really... Okay. That's a really stupid idea, like that you couldn't do that. Have you ever played games like Assassin's Creed or Red Dead Redemption? That's even a Rockstar game. People liken it to like a GTA thing where, you could just go on a rampage. Assassin's Creed will literally, and I'm not misusing that word, Gen X, literally, or is it Gen Z? Hell, I don't know. Assassin's Creed will literally desynchronize you and your game will be over if you kill a civilian. So the idea that you can't have a Superman game because maybe you're telling on yourself and your sociopathic tendencies, maybe you should check out a therapist or, get some sessions there, bud, because you can easily make that game where you cannot go on a civilian killing spree. So, I would like to see that as well. It's just mind-blowing to me that, one of the most identifiable, if not the most identifiable superhero does not have a video game. I mean, it's just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. But yeah, Superman would be the guy for me. How about you, Chris? Who would you like to see in a video game?
I don't know. This one it just popped into my head, and again, a novice DC consumer, but I think a Green Lantern game would be hella fun. Go into space and going to these different alien worlds. I think an open world type of game like that, where you're going from planet to planet and fighting evil. I'm not well versed in whatever Green Lantern is, but just the concept of it would be fun. Okay.
I can agree with that. The constructs and everything, the powers that the ring has. Yeah, I can see that being a crap ton of fun, Chris.
All right, our good buddy, King Henry the Nerd. You can find him on Instagram at KingHenry_the_nerd. He says, how do you believe the DC Comics Warner Media moniker will fare under the yet again new ownership with Discovery?
Chris, I have to say I'm really liking that we're getting some DC questions this time around. I felt like every time we do a mailbag, it's mostly Marvel stuff. So yay, DC. I wish this was a question that I could answer, with some hope, but I think it's probably going to be about the same it has been for DC. These sort of corporate shifts often have very little impact unless, they are willing to replace a whole bunch of people in their executive suites. And that's always a toss-up whether they'll do that or not. The sad thing is Warner never has quite figured out what to do with DC properties. They show no love or care for the characters. They focus primarily on trying to milk as much money as quickly as possible from the characters. The notion of showing them love and care like the MCU tries to do, paying tribute to some of the best comic book storylines, using those as jumping on points for movies, that seems to never really occur to them. So the fact that we haven't had a good Superman movie since the 1980s, for example, is really a crying shame. The way Warner absolutely bombed making a good Justice League movie, not once but twice, blows my mind. So, what do I predict happening? More Batman movies.
Yeah, the only inkling that I have of hope, call it a glimmer, is that, I don't know the specifics of this. All of that news dump completely went over my head. I feel like those gifs of like the equation in the air and just that look of confusion. I don't understand any of that, but just me on the outside, if Discovery, aka the content creator, is in charge of things, maybe they can lead into the fact that they also are content creators primarily, and it's not the evil suits overlords, AT&T. So maybe they will be able to kind of tap into those creative juices, if you will.
Yeah, that would be nice. I think there just needs to be a shift at the head of whatever, corporate entity this is going to be, that's a little bit more creator friendly and has a better understanding that, hey, Disney and with Marvel was able to literally like print their own money at this point. There's no reason they can't do something similar with DC if they, take the time and really let creators take the lead with that.
I feel as far as like the perspective, DC properties going forward, I feel like completely in the dark. Like when you start a video game and your minimap has absolutely nothing highlighted and it's just all completely in this intense fog. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair, Chris.
All right, so next up from Instagram, our pal Nerd2Ween Nerdpool Prime asks us, and you can follow him at Nerd2Ween _and_a_ holy crap, movie _podcast.
For a second, I thought holy crap was part of his screen handle. So
oh yeah, so let's try that again. Nerd2Ween _and_a_ movie _podcast. Do you guys agree that when Wolverine is introduced in the MCU, should Marvel #make Wolverine short again?
You know what? Sure. I do think Wolverine should be short again. The fact that the other X-Men kind of tower over him is, visually speaking, pretty interesting for the character. More importantly, though, when it comes to the introduction of the X-Men, I want him to wear the darn suit. I want all the X-Men to wear some actual superhero costumes. We finally moved past the perception that superheroes on the big screen can't wear their comic book costumes, so let's get the X-Men on the big screen in all their colorful visual glory. Short Wolverine? Sure. But also put him in the darn suit.
I'm actually puzzled by this question because I don't think that Laura Kinney is short.
Very good, Chris. Very good.
That's the only Wolverine that I know.
Oh,
Logan? Yeah, he's short. I guess there's my sneaking suspicion. I don't anticipate it happening, but I want Laura Kinney as Wolverine on the screen. I don't know that we'll get it. Probably won't, but here's hoping. The far superior Wolverine. Logan has just never been a character that really catered to my interests beyond the animated series. Shout outs to Cal Dodd. So I think, in all sincerity, I think it is an integral part of what should happen. I mean, for Pete's sake, that's the whole joke behind the fastball special, in that any of his teammates can just pick his short ass up and throw him. So I think it's an important part of Logan is to make him short for sure.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
All right, our final question is a really interesting one from friend of the show, loyal listener, loyal supporter, Kevin Ewing. You can find him on Twitter at KevinEwing22. This is a deep one, and it seems a fitting one to end on. He asks, there seems to be a lot of negativity towards the 616 Avengers by the X-Men Online fans, and it is not exclusive to Wanda. Do you think the comics version of the Avengers deserve that heat? And if so, what do you think about X-Men fans that are also fans of the Avengers?
I don't know if I'm the right guy to answer this, Chris. I'm not that familiar with the interplay between the two teams. Can you explain this to me a little bit further?
Well, to summarize it very quickly, the Avengers are cops. So basically, kind of give you some background in this, people who feel very strongly in this fashion are leaning heavy into the mutant metaphor. And if you're new to the mutant metaphor, is the idea of being a mutant has been throughout much of the X-Men's history, at least since Claremont came onto the title in the 70s, has been used as a metaphor for any kind of minority. More recently, it is widely accepted that the X-Men and mutants at large are written to be black-coded and queer-coded. So the difficult relationship, the tenuous relationship that the X-Men have had towards the Avengers specifically, a lot of that stems off a very controversial run, or arc, I should say, Avengers versus X-Men, that had a lot of ground-shaking, earth-shattering, universe-changing outcomes, not to mention the abrupt divorce of T'Challa and Storm that we've talked about on the show before, and just the idea that kind of perpetuates the persecution of mutants. So a lot of X-Men fans on X-Twitter specifically, kind of the running joke is that the Avengers are cops, and insinuating the difficult relationship that, and this, I feel completely unqualified to make a lot of this, a lot of these points, being a white man, but a lot of fans on X Twitter see it as an overarching metaphor for the tenuous relationship that Black Americans and Black people around the world have with law enforcement. The Avengers specifically, it was a really kind of difficult, kind of depiction, particularly in that crossover event where a lot of people saw it as just another persecution of the X-Men, of mutant kind, by the law-abiding, law enforcement, if you will, of the Marvel Universe. So it has been a very tenuous relationship. Personally, I am a fan of both. That kind of is in jeopardy the crazier this current Avengers run gets. But that is the basis. So I definitely ascribe to the fact that you can subscribe to the fact that you can be a fan of both, of course. It's just something that, maybe you want to inform yourself about with kind of the subtext. And again, I do not in any way feel qualified to talk immensely about this, but that is just what I have learned in my discussions with friends on X Twitter. That is the gist of it, is that a lot of mutant fans who themselves are, Black or LGBTQ, kind of see it as this continuous, perpetual, pursuit of, keeping minorities in check, so to speak. Now, I will say that there are a lot of mutant fans who are very, very upset by the Axis retcon that Wanda is not, in fact, a mutant. So there are Wanda fans on both sides of the fence there. So I have encountered both. All right, thank you so much for all those questions. When we come back from this, our final break, we're going to hit you with 2 more patented nerd commendations, detective style. All right, we are back for our final segment, the one that you came for, the one that we are most famous for. Nerd Commendations. We are both putting on our detective hats. We've pulled out our magnifying glass. Okay, it's just getting cartoony. Dave, what's your nerd commendation?
Chris, we talked a lot about how much we both enjoy mysteries and detective stories, and even, Peter Falk's Columbo. Well, since we're both nerds of crime stories, I have a pretty neat nerd commendation this week. Cold Case was a CBS police procedural that ran from 2003 until 2010. It recently made its way to HBO Max, which is fantastic news, especially considering it has never been released to DVD or Blu-ray. Cold Case follows Detective Lily Rush, played by Catherine Morris, who works as a Philadelphia homicide detective and specializes in cold cases, so those cases that happened some time ago and are not actively pursued anymore. This basic premise allowed the creators of the show to craft a pretty darn unique take on the police procedural. Episodes are littered with flashback scenes as Rush interviews witnesses and sometimes several decades after the fact. So you get basically, sort of like situations where multiple actors play the same roles, usually one as a young person in the flashback and then another as an elderly person in the present day scenes. The show also always uses period authentic music in its soundtrack, which is why the show has never been released on DVD or Blu-ray. Licensing of all of that music makes a release pretty darn expensive. The music plays an incredibly important role in the show and really helps set the tone. Thankfully, the HBO Max release features all of the original music. The show's focus lies less on the detectives and more on the victims. Through the flashbacks, you really get a sense of these characters and the tragedy of losing them. Each episode is also punctuated with Rush and others involved in the case seeing sort of like a ghostly apparition of the victim, a sort of final goodbye, which often hits with a lot of emotional punch. The show also is willing to explore difficult topics such as racism, sexism, homophobia, and police brutality. And as a fan of good acting, it's also fun to see several actors that would go on to greater fame pop up on the show as guest stars. In the first handful of episodes alone, we get early roles from Kate Mara, Summer Glau, and Brandon Routh, just to name a few. In short, the cases are interesting, the flashback gimmick works like a charm, the music is killer and sets the tone perfectly, the victims come to life as real characters, unlike most police procedurals, and the topics remain relevant today. The show packs a great emotional punch on top of all that. It's really a near perfect procedural and is highly recommended, Chris.
No, that's awesome. I remember when this show was running, like I remember the solicits and everything, but I never did check it out. So it's no secret how much I love detective procedurals, stuff like that. So I'm definitely going to have to check this one out.
Now, Chris, what are you nerd commending for us this week?
So it made no secret who my favorite mutant is, and that would be none other than the blue furry elf, if you will, the German known as Kurt Wagner. So in a recent episode of another podcast, I'm just sharing the love of nerdy podcasts, of Cerebrocast, which is if you're really looking for a place to start, reading X-Men books or particular characters, and you want to get the gist of it, basically like a graduate level deep dive on the character history, I highly recommend that. So I was listening to their Nightcrawler episode, being that he's my favorite character, and they were talking about the 2004 solo series written by Roberto Aguirre Sacasa with art by Derek Robertson, and really kind of perked my ears up because I had seen it in passing and never really heard a lot of fanfare for it. So, it was only 12 issue run. So, and I recognized Aguirre Sacasa's name based on his run on Sensational Spider-Man, a B-title book that I thoroughly enjoyed that was kind of running concurrent with the JMS run of Peter being a teacher, and I absolutely adored it. So I saw his name attached, and I was like, I got to read this. And it was an absolute diamond in the rough, man. All I have to say is Kurt Wagner is a paranormal detective. What more do you need? So, yeah, one of the absolute worst comics that I ever read was The Draco by Chuck Austin. in which it was revealed all subtext literally be damned, and that Kurt Wagner's father is actually, for all intents and purposes, the devil, and that's why he has that appearance. So all of that beautiful kind of, symbolism and of being this gem of an individual, despite your outward appearance to the world, was just thrown in the waste bin or into the depths of hell. And so this was after that kind of storyline, and it really kind of leaned into that without kind of the ugly parts of it. So just the idea, and here's the synopsis from Goodreads. The X-Men known as Nightcrawler is a man with a foot in two worlds. One, the daylight world of superheroes and supervillains. The other, a netherworld of demons and angels, ghosts and monsters, human and otherwise. So it was just like a really fun kind of detective comic, which I haven't had the pleasure of reading a whole lot of. But then you inject all these aspects, thanks to Nerd Nightmare this past October, that I'm much more willing to dive into, and I feel pretty brave about enjoying. And this is, I'm already ready to give this next year's Nerdy for the back issue gem or best back issue discovery. It is absolutely just a really fun read, and it just, kind of that genre blending like we talked about with Army of the Dead, of multiple genres just completely intermixed, of superhero comics with detective stuff along with the supernatural and the occult. It's pretty dark, and I'm pretty proud of myself that I read this with the lights off and I didn't have to, light candles and start any incantations. But I absolutely love this book. And I definitely want to follow Aguirre Sacasa's work, which a quick Google search shows me that he is the showrunner, or was, I don't know, about your favorite show ever.
Yeah, he was. And actually, this sounds actually perfectly right up my alley. Nightcrawler, given his spirituality and the fact that he's German, always made him one of my, favorite X-Men characters. And his current series is the only Krakoa series I've actually been able to really get into, which is hilarious. He's just such a fascinating character, and when written well, always kind of rises to the top of a lot of these X-Men characters. And yes, I'm a big fan of Sacasa's. Alone his work on Chilling Adventures of Sabrina makes him a top-notch creator in my book. God, he knows how to capture the horror genre perfectly. So I was not aware of this book in any way, shape, or form, but it is now at the top of my list. I'm definitely checking it out ASAP, Chris.
Yeah, I'm telling you what, also be sure to check out his run on Sensational Spider-Man. If you love the JMS era, like I said, it is completely, in a lot of ways, I enjoyed it even more than JMS's run. It's just even more of those, famously with Spider-Man B books, it's the outside of the suit stuff for the most part, except for a couple of pages in each book. So it is really leaning into that personal side of Peter Parker as a teacher, behind the scenes stuff. And I absolutely adore it. And, coupled with what next week's Nerd Commendation is, I'm really feeling like I'm evolving as a consumer of nerd content. But there's a tease for you.
Oh,
all right, that wraps up another episode of the Nerd Byword. Thank you so much to all of you that submitted questions. This is always a fun episode to just kind of shoot the stuff and really get some interaction with our audience. So we truly appreciate your support, and be ready for next week, because we are going to a galaxy far, far away, if I'm not mistaken, Dave.
Oh, has the time already come to fix The Force Awakens? That's hard to believe, Chris.
And as always, if you are wanting to engage with us, if you have something to say, please follow us on our social media platforms at Nerd Byword, on Twitter and Instagram, at the Nerd Byword on Facebook, and subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast from, or nerdbyword.com. And as always, stay well and stay nerdy.
The Nerd Byword is written and produced by Kris and Dave, two nerds with a love of all things pop culture. The podcast features music by Al Jimenez with additional drops composed by Joe Biondi. Our show art is by Ashery Design. Find us at nerdbyword.com and wherever podcasts are available.